Welcome to the About the Brother podcast. I'm Calvin, and this week we have a very special guest, none other than the former CIA agent, a.k.a. my dad, Kerry Alexander.
I refuse to confirm or deny.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're staying with that one? Okay. All right, cool. Well, Sam and Sam Walter and the other guys are taking a little bit of a break here, but definitely glad to have my dad in studio up in OSU, and of course blessed with the KOSU studio as usual. But Dad, wanted to ask you of your insight and stuff. You were formerly an OU fan that then went to OSU and graduated. So the past, at least, can you reflect a little bit on maybe why OU hasn't been that great over the past 18 years with Bob Stoops, and maybe why that fans shouldn't have been, OU fans at least, shouldn't have been really happy with that success that he had?
Well, we'll tell you this, as a fervent OSU fan that was a fervent OU fan, Bob Stoops has been amazing for OU. His record winning championships at OU has been fantastic, which really makes Mike Gundy and the Oklahoma State success even better. I mean, it's one thing to have a few good years against OU when they're dealing with Howard Blake or Howard Schnellenberger or John Blake, but when you're dealing with somebody who's won a national championship, who wins the conference every year or almost every year, that to me says something. And Gundy has done well against him. So Stoops has been he's on the Mount Rushmore of OU coaches, which says something.
Yeah. Well, previously, we're talking in the car ride up here a little bit about how that, Mike Gundy has led to a lot of the success that OSU's had against OU, even when it's very small amount of success in comparison. You want to reflect more on that a little?
I was born in 1964, and if you look back at the history of Bedlam football, and you look at the years between, say, 1960 and 1990, I think OSU won one game. I mean, I think there may have been one or two in the early 60s, but during my lifetime, before 1990, it was like 1976 was it. And I remember that game well because I was an OU fan at the time, and I went to the game with an OSU fan that was my age that fully expected to see his team get throttled, and they won. And I remember going home just being completely embarrassed and thought, oh no, this can't happen. And because you never expected OSU to beat OU. Never thought in your wildest dreams it would happen, but it did. And it was an amazing game for OSU fans. And then you flash forward to what we've seen more recently. OSU won some games in the 90s, which were impressive. But do you know, Calvin, in the history of the OSU-OU rivalry, OSU has beaten OU 5 times when OU has been a ranked team?
Did not know.
And of those 5 times, 4 of those 5 times, Mike Gundy has either been the offensive coordinator or the head coach.
Oh, wow, I think that speaks volumes to how Mike Gundy's helped out.
Yeah, and I think we lose sight of that. I think we think Mike Gundy, because OSU has a stadium that is on the lower tier of the acceptable, high-level, big-time football program stadiums. The fact that OSU kind of moved up to that stage means that we should compete equally with OU. I think that's a little bit grandiose. I certainly think that we should be able to play with OU and compete with them on an even playing field at least more often than what we do. I think that's probably fair to expect that. But most years, it's a very competitive game. And the fact that we've won, in this decade, we've won twice. This year, we certainly have a great chance to win going forward. We'll see how Lincoln Riley does. But we have Mike Gundy here a long time. And we have a great recruiting class coming in. We've got some tremendous talent. So I think that the future is bright at Oklahoma State. Things have never been more competitive. And we're competing against an OU team that is operating right now at a level where they were in the Final Four playoff, season before last. This past year, they had a good year. They've had seasons recently where they've beaten Nick Saban and Alabama. So I think that we're playing against a good OU team. You look at the competitive relationship we have with Texas. Now, Texas has been down, but Texas has been down because we've been beating the crap out of them. Yeah. You look at over history, our history against Texas, our record against Texas all time is 7-24. 7-24 all time. But in the last 7 years, we've beaten Texas 5 of 7 times. So, do the math. Before that, it was 2-22. So we are in the heyday of Oklahoma State football right now, and I think that sometimes we get so caught up in what happened yesterday, or did we have a good second half, or did we air the ball out enough on a rainy day, and did Mason Rudolph have broken ribs still, and should we have done more or done less, that we lose sight of the fact that we really are doing a great job at Oklahoma State. We have a team that is nationally known, that competes very well, and that OU does have an excellent program. We're in a small state, and we still are at this level of competing at such a high level.
Yeah. There's never problems that I face with trying to get students to a game as an OSU student. Usually the issue is how students reflect on the game after it's over, which is kind of related to back what you're saying. And I just try to put it in perspective. So the first couple of games that I remember going to as an OSU fan when I was real little, 10 or younger, was the back-to-back years that we beat OU in 02 and 03, when that was the pinnacle of success. OSU didn't go to a bowl game that year, but literally our championship, our bowl game of sorts was beating OU. There are still some shirts out there that said, "Oh no, we did it again, Stoops," that are aging past the time where they are no longer they're not, well, one, they're not in this decade. Two, they're not even 10 years ago. They're more than a decade ago. And there's still people celebrating that fact, wearing those shirts proudly around campus or wherever. And that refers me back to the idea of when OSU wasn't the, horseshoe-esque stadium that we are now. Of Boone Pickens Stadium, we're still Lewis Field. I've still got the snow globe at home when we're to Lewis Field. And, it's kind of this like weird setup that everyone used to have before we had this, we had the T. Boone Pickens of the world come calling and offer us, his money and resources for us to get a better athletics programs across the board, but especially football-wise, with state-of-the-art facilities and state-of-the-art stadium. And it's hard to, tell a couple friends who decided to go OSU who were previously from Texas, from the Dallas DFW area or from Texas, and they decided to go to OSU, and to tell them, hey, I know you guys grew up watching, UT or A&M or whoever else, or, maybe Tech or whoever else play, and you really didn't, watch a ton of OSU football, and then you get here and you just think, well, we were ranked this high, we should be doing this good, and this should be the norm, when this is kind of becoming the norm, but it's been a slow build, with kind of a rapid success in 2011, of course, with a field goal that, well, Dan Bailey made that he didn't make in Iowa State on a weird Friday night. But without that game, we're in a national championship game in 2011 with Whedon and Blackman. And, and that was 2011. And it's weird to think that we're about to enter the sixth football season after that. And we're right back kind of in that, hey, OSU's top 10 in the country. It's a really cool thing to be a part of and see that, because previously it'd been like, well, we got Zach Robinson and Brandon Pettigrew and the Woods brothers, and then now we're still going. We're still going. It's awesome to see 6 years later that OSU is at the point where it's not a, hey, well, we had a rise and then we're gonna have a little bit of drop off and rebuild. It seems like we're kind of becoming that kind of OU type of reloading, where we're going, hey, where's the rise? Got Brandon Whedon, who previously played for the New York Yankees and kind of flukily went to OSU as a walk-on and then got scholarship, of course, and then Justin Blackman, who was from Ardmore, who wasn't really highly touted recruit and stuff like that, and then he becomes a huge success. Of course, his pro career wasn't, but his college career definitely was, with the Blitnikoff Awards. And then, oh, wait a second, there's this Mason Rudolph guy from South Carolina who didn't decide to stay in the SEC and decided to play for one of those schools as a quarterback. He didn't decide to go to the Big Ten, which would have been still closer. He decided to go to a Big 12 school, none other than Oklahoma State, as a top-tiered recruit. And all of a sudden, he's throwing it to a myriad of receivers who, with the help of Rob Glass and other guys, are turning James Washington, a 2-star receiver coming out of high school, into a probably a first-round draft pick, coming out of next season. So it's crazy.
Well, Mason Rudolph, he was in the shadow of Clemson Stadium. He could have been the Clemson quarterback these past couple of years, and he could have been there competing against Alabama the last 2 seasons. But a lot to unpack there. First of all, the marketing department of Oklahoma State was at its height of its game after 02 and 03, because they had the shirt that said "Oops, Stoops, Oops, we did it again," and it played off Britney Spears a little bit there as well. But you look at those years. Looking back at Oklahoma State's history, what we were used to as OSU fans, I was at Oklahoma State in what I would consider the golden era of Oklahoma State, except for the era that you and some of the current students are at right now. But in 82 through 86, we had athletes such as John Smith was a wrestler here at that time. with the baseball team. You talk about some bad dudes playing baseball. I mean, hard to remember how tough these guys were, but Pete Incaviglia, he hit, I forget how many home runs he hit, but I think it was close to 100. But they named him the best college baseball player of the century. He was so bad. He would go up to bat, and you just knew it was going out of the park every time. That team had so many bad dudes. Even Jim Traber, who's on the radio in Oklahoma City, which I think a lot of OSU fans kind of have a love-hate relationship with. He was one of those guys that was just a nasty, tough guy at first base. Loved watching him play when I was up here, and he played quarterback on the football team as well. But we had really good baseball teams. The basketball team, we had almost no success, no NCAA tournaments. Again, from Hank Iba all the way through until we had Leonard Hamilton, except for 1 year under Paul Hansen when I was in school here. And that year we went to the tournament and lost to Princeton first round, but we had an NCAA tournament year that year. It was a great year that we made it to the tournament at least. And then, of course, in football, when I was up here, we had a few players you might have heard of. Thurman Thomas, Barry Sanders, Leslie O'Neal. Those are a few guys you might have heard of.
Sounds familiar.
And we had a coach that went on. I think he coached later for Miami, and then he coached Dallas Cowboys. But Jimmy Johnson was the coach. I got to work for him a little bit as a tutor, but for the football team. But we had some really good years. But what happened is, during the Jim Stanley era, we won in '76, and then probation. Under Jimmy Johnson, we had some good years, and then suddenly probation. And what we're seeing under Mike Gundy is a clean program that even with all the crap that Thayer Evans and Sports Illustrated at the lowest moment in that proud publication's history stooped to, speaking of stooped to, even after all that scrutiny, nothing, clean as a whistle. I mean, just an incredible program under Mike Gundy, doing it the right way, the clean way. And, looking at what we got from Boone Pickens, that man, I think every OSU fan should thank him every day, not only now, but well into the future, because without his gifts, without what he did for football, without what Eddie Sutton did for basketball, those two things together really elevated Oklahoma State to a new level. But you look at what he did, it did a tremendous amount. But we have to give Mike Gundy a lot of credit, too, because the fact that we have a 60,000-seat stadium that is generally about 80 to 90% full most games, sometimes we fill it, but still mostly full, doesn't really compare to what we see in the SEC, where about 7 different schools have stadiums that are close to 100,000, if not more, that fit 80,000 into the stadium for their spring game.
Yeah, that's we're not on the same level as those SEC schools. I don't think really the Big 12 is. It's and I know Texas has a lot of excitement now with Tom Herman coming in as coach and going from Houston to Texas. And I know today you were saying in the Oklahoma paper how they're asking if the rivalry is renewed between Texas and OU, between the two brand new head coaches and stuff. And what I keep thinking about about OU as truly as an OSU fan, though, of course, is Lincoln Riley's 33. 33, and he's on the younger side of 33. That's by far away the youngest head coach in FBS, and he's taking over I would say a Power 5 school all time, as far as a top 5 school all time in OU. National championships and their prestigious legacy and stuff like that. And you've got a 33-year-old who comes in and takes the reins. And on previously a couple podcasts, I've kind of hinted at the fact the whole Bob Stoops resigning thing has been weird in my mind. And there's not a lot of media saying something about he resigned and it's because of this or whatever. And I know that reason Stoops gave was to watch his 2 sons who are entering their senior year of high school football in Norman. What's weird for me, though, is that it's not that there's not a lot of media coverage, because there's not a lot to cover about this. There's not a lot more info and stuff. It's that a week after Stoops retired, we didn't really hear anything else. Stoops was being touted as maybe the head coach at some NFL team, or Stoops was called by Jerry Jones and was given exclusive offer to join the coaching staff down in Dallas. As an offensive coordinator or. It's like that. It's kind of weird because Stoops isn't 60 yet, and if you got Nick Saban, is way older than him, and I don't think that it's weird that Bob Stoops resigned the way he did and how sudden it was, and how that they introduced the new head coach the exact same day, where that the new head coach, Lincoln Riley's parents, Lincoln Riley and his parents weren't given enough notice, where Lincoln Riley's parents had enough time to get on a plane, private jet or not, to make it down to Norman to watch their son get introduced as the OU head coach. That still emanates in my mind of how, okay, hang on a second here. All this happened so quickly that the new head coach's parents weren't even given enough heads up to get on any plane to get down there.
I'm always tempted to take shots at OU. Even though I was an OU fan growing up, it's always tempting to take shots. But he did it in a clean way that his predecessor, at least his predecessor on the Mount Rushmore, Barry Switzer, did not do. I mean, Switzer's one of those charismatic guys. I've spent time around him at a couple of different things over the years, and he is a very likable guy. But people forget, especially those, that weren't even born yet, students that are on campus now, or even those that have graduated recently, forget about the 80s. There were people hanging out of dormitory windows shooting Uzis, and there were the type of scandals that were going on then that were reported. This is stuff before the internet. So, the stuff that actually made it to a highly controlled local media was just jaw-dropping under Switzer. And the national media got hold of some of the stuff, but it's not like now where everybody has a camera and takes a picture of everything with their cell phone. This was back in the 80s where it took some doing to get noticed. And Switzer stuff got noticed. And when you had OU quarterbacks on the cover of Sports Illustrated selling cocaine, it was just beyond the pale what was going on back in those days. And you look at what Stoops has done, and by and large, he's had some players get arrested and some things where he's probably cut some corners. But by and large, I think he's done it in a fair way. He didn't reach the success as far as the total number of national championships and the win-loss percentage and a lot of things that the two major predecessors did at OU. But overall, he did a great job. But to your point, I think everybody's been hesitant to criticize what he's done or the way it's been covered because you just wonder if there's another shoe to drop. Is there something about a health issue with him or maybe a member of his close family? Because if that's true, any criticism would come across as being very unfair. But based on what we know now and all the denials that there is a health issue, it does seem bizarre to resign in June. Football season ends in January, and you resign 5 months later. It just doesn't happen a lot without a lot of questions and criticism, and the media gave him a complete pass on that. And it really handcuffed the university. There aren't a lot of coaches out there that are going to switch, and it's not the time of year where you have a lot of movement. The recruits obviously have been signed up for months, so they have no choice as to what to do. It's an odd time to resign. It's an odd time to have this happen, and it does raise a lot of questions. And to your point, the fact that he resigned at a time so quickly that it couldn't even be like, hey, we've been talking about this for a while. I think I'm going to announce it in a couple of weeks. I know this has been on the schedule for a while, but let's go ahead and announce it in June. Let's get Riley's family up here. Let's get it all done. It does seem like it was over like a 48-hour period. It was, hey, this is happening. Get it done. We're going to have a press conference faster than we can get people on a plane.
Yeah, and it's and then the other side of it for a second is that Barry Trammell, longtime Oklahoma sports writer of the Oklahoman
and alum
of OU, is given the article to write about Bob Stoops. And then he's given. So Bob Stoops given all the information about it, or I'm sorry, Bob Stoops or somebody gives Barry Trammell all this information about it to basically be able to write that story ahead of time, and then. I don't think it went to print that day, but of course to upload online where it's going to get, clearly a OU head coach resigning as the main title is going to get a guy so many mentions and so many, it was Barry Trammell who broke it, etc. And it just seems weird the way that the whole thing developed and went down. And if it is a family health issue, I really hope it's not. No one does, but it's kind of one of those things where just seems like there's something else happened or something else out there. And who knows, maybe we'll learn in 5 years that, Bob Stoops was just, hey, I missed every single one of my son's football games up until, his senior year. And you know what? I drew a line and I kept drawing that line. And eventually it was the time that I need to resign from OU. And that's completely respectable. It just is also, it's screwed my mind to the guy of his power and his presence, stuff like that. resigns when he does.
Well, let me ask you this. If Mike Gundy had resigned to spend more time with his kids the exact same day in June, how would the press treated that differently? And I think that just pause there for a second for the podcast listeners. Think about how those articles have been written. Even if you're an OU fan, think about how those articles would have been written differently. We read day after day puff pieces about how great it was, Stoops' legacy. Lincoln Riley is going to be a great successor. What a great time it is. Stoops has done such a good job, how well it was handled. That's all we ever read. I mean, for day after day after day, puff piece. And had it happened the other way around, the entire coverage would have been nothing but, boy, the Pickens and Gundy feud finally broke. Instead, about the same time, Gundy signed on for an additional, 5 years, which will probably take him through at least most of the rest of his career, if not, another extension after that would. But it kind of got buried a little bit in the news that Gundy signed on for more time. But that would have been handled so differently. And it just kind of, you scratch your head and go, really? Is that the way that we handle stuff in the state? There aren't going to be some critical articles that go into it and say, is there more to this? Is Stoops kind of fed up with the expectation of fans? And this is where, even though as an OSU fan it's hard to do this, I feel a little bit sorry for Stoops. He has won championships, and those are hard to do. Oklahoma State's had some awfully good teams, and beating Bill Snyder and K-State's been tough, and Texas has been down. But Texas has been down because Oklahoma State and OU have been beating the crap out of Texas. It's not that, good teams from Oklahoma have been beating the crap out of them. So they've been down because we've been up, and we've been getting the good players up at our schools. That's a big part of why Texas is down.
And we were a couple seconds away, and a field goal miss a little bit to the other direction from being 10-3 last year. Against in the win-loss record because of Texas. They came to OSU and they really closely, or that was Texas Tech, but that was really closely beat us. And then Texas had two of their one of the running backs go down when they played us up at OSU, and other than that, they're beating the crap out of us. Early start that game last year, and that's when OSU had one of our better defensive teams in my mind, and better offensive teams as well.
We've been down to Texas the last couple of years. I mean, I think 3 years in a row, you and I have been down to Texas with one of your brothers to go down and watch them play. But for one of the oddest punt situations in Texas, and then Mason Rudolph having one of those games where you just go, what in the world's going on? Mason Rudolph gave him two. I mean, Mason Rudolph is one of the best quarterback. He may be the most talented quarterback I've seen play in Orange for Oklahoma State ever. But he had a game at Texas a couple of years ago where he gave him 2 touchdowns, and then at the end of the game, Texas was just rolling, and tie game at the end, and the punter whiffed on a punt, and we got the ball and scored at the end to win. Texas fans were just beside themselves, but we've won some very narrow escapes against Texas, and like I said, we've won 5 of the last 7, but before that we were 2-22 against Texas before 5 of the last 7, and they've been tough fought games. And even the one in Stillwater, they won one a few years ago when they fumbled the ball within the 1 yard line, but it wasn't seen, and they gave them a touchdown. And then we had the fancy double pass that almost went the entire way in Stillwater. So there's a lot to be said there. But Stoops has won a lot, and to finish off on OU, the fact that he's been so successful and the fact that he has to go through so much every year about why aren't you doing more, why aren't you winning more, he has taken them to a pretty high level every year, and they may find out pretty quickly the difference between Barry Switzer and Gary Gibbs was a huge difference. Gary Gibbs was a highly successful, polished, slick man in waiting that was going to rise to the top. And when he got the head job, he did a great job when he was top assistant. But when he got the head job, the team went downhill. And we'll see if Lincoln Riley can take it on and go. But, Bob Stoops, an amazing coach, did an amazing job. And I suspect he'll be out of it for a couple of years. And he may pop up on TV. But I wouldn't be terribly surprised if there's an opening with the Browns or somewhere else, if he isn't an NFL coach after his kids start their college careers, if he didn't pop up on the NFL level.
Yeah, same here as well. Well, we've been getting predictions earlier on about the OSU season coming up. Can we get a prediction out of you? How do you think they're going to do this year?
We always seem to stub our toe against somebody unexpectedly. You mentioned Iowa State in that 2011 year. And by the way, you mentioned we were just a missed field goal away. That obviously, Calvin, our family has a history with Remember the 10 run, and the day of that game was one where 4 members of the women's basketball team, Greater family, perished. 2 pilots, the Brandstetters, and then 2 coaches perished in a plane crash. And even though they weren't directly associated with the football team, that kind of thing happens, and it makes everyone, especially young people who feel invincible, suddenly have to take a step back and look at life is fragile. And I think that kind of a day really threw off our team that day in Iowa State. And it still was a heck of a game, and that field goal counts. We win probably. But I think that one of the biggest factors of us not going to the national championship game is the fact that Nick Saban could not beat LSU on his own field when he had a chance to earlier in the year. Because if Nick Saban beats LSU, he's probably in the national championship game, and we're probably playing Alabama. Instead, he loses, and he gets to spend the entire day that we are beating OU. I think the score may have been like 80-3. I forget what the final score was, but
44-10. But yeah,
I mean, at some point, Blake, what's his name, scored to give him a couple points, but Landry Jones was throwing the ball to Rashedi Jones, I think, most of the game. But it was one of those days where, as we're throttling OU, a big rival, Nick Saban is on TV all day campaigning for the national championship game. And had Nick Saban had something else to do, such as playing in his own conference championship game, we might have been national champions that year, because I don't think LSU could have scored enough to keep up with the offense that took on Stanford and Andrew Luck and beat them in the Fiesta Bowl.
It's so incredibly true. Well, still though, gonna hold you to it.
See, I thought you'd forget.
No,
I thought if I did that, you'd forget.
Almost got lost, but no, I'm still gonna.
We'll stub our toe once against a team that we don't expect to, and we'll end up with one loss, but we'll beat OU. And we'll play OU again for the Big 12 championship, and we'll beat them, and we'll go to. I think we'll be in the Final Four. I think this is a year where, absent some strange number of injuries, but we have enough running backs, enough wide receivers that if Mason Rudolph stays healthy, that's the only caveat. If he stays healthy, I see us rolling through this year and having a heck of a year. And even that one loss, I've got a little bit of a question about, because I don't know that we'll let up, but I just have a feeling that we'll get our toe stubbed at least once. And then we'll power through the rest of the year, and we'll probably play OU twice and beat them twice.
I think almost exactly like you do. I have a hard time believing that this OSU have a hard time believing that really a college football team right now can just go undefeated in college football. I think it's just so hard to do. But if there was an OSU team to do it, it'd be this OSU team. From the years that I've been alive and watching OSU football, it'd be this OSU team to do it. And I think that there is a strong chance that we can beat OU the first time when we play them. And then when we play in the conference championship, if it's OU again, I think there's a strong chance that if we see him again, we'll learn from our mistakes. Mike Gundy, has been on 4 out of the 5 coaching staffs that beat OU when they've been ranked. And I think there's just a strong chance we'll be able to beat OU again with a brand new head coach, with OU reloading. Of course, they're never rebuilding, but they're reloading their star positions for the next season. The running backs haven't had none of the running backs they have from the roster right now have had more than 50 snaps in any capacity whatsoever at OU. And so losing Mixon, P. Ryan, 2 highly drafted running backs, losing a Blitnikoff winner or Heisman finalist, and D.D. Westbrook, losing him as well. At some point, something's got to hurt OU a little bit. That's kind of how I feel as an OSU fan, is that at some point, OU's just got to have a little bit of a down year. And of course, there's the one year where they went 8-5, and it was #fire Stoops the entire season. And I'm over here as an OSU fan going, man, if you told me we went 8-5, I'd be ecstatic. Over the last 18 years, if you told me we had an 8-5 overall average, I would be ecstatic as an OSU fan if we had 8-5 as overall average. But I just feel like this is the one year that OU might have to reload a little bit more than usual with their star players, especially. And OU has a good defense; they always do. But maybe a little bit of trouble with the law and stuff like that. As far as the defensive size, I don't know. Maybe OSU has a real good chance this year about turning the page and beating OU this time, and then again really learn from it. And then, of course, I like OSU's defense for the one reason that it is a very Big 12 defense. So it is a defense that is set up to hold teams to a certain points in a game. Not, no Big 12 defense in my mind is really stopping a team on a 4th and 1. That's not how Big 12 defenses are set up, or much less, a 3rd and 5 really with the slants and pass sappy and stuff like that. But for us to have a defense where we've got guys returning, we've got guys who are losing, but I think OSU has a good enough defense this year, at least, to hold teams to a certain amount of points in a game, get a couple of turnovers when it matters, really a ton, just so we can still outscore teams. Because that's how Big 12 works, is you have to outscore teams. And of course, the conference champion last year, if I'm not wrong, was OU and of the Big 12, and they played at Tech, and they played one of the craziest games I've ever seen in college football, where they won like 69-56 or something like that, where OU just outscored the crap out of Tech. I mean, don't get me wrong, OU clearly won that game by 14 points or something, maybe even more than that, or maybe a little less, I could be wrong, but OU won that game by outscoring Texas Tech. OU's defense, with all the guys they have, and the guys who are draft eligible and maybe drafted or whatever they recruited, I mean, that Texas Tech, Pat Mahomes, was really the only guy on the team that I can remember and probably will ever remember on that Texas Tech team from last year, scored 56 points. And I just think that's kind of how Big 12 football is played. You have the conference champion holding a team to 56 points. And I think 10 years ago, we've been like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, is a conference champion holding a team to 56. That's, 10 years ago, you put that in perspective, and it's, hang on a second, what are we really talking about here? And then, 10 years later, that's kind of the norm. That's how teams win games.
I wish I could think of his name, but Texas Tech had a kick returner running back that just went nuts on us the entire game. It was just all over the field like crazy. But last year, if I recall, there were at least 2, Iowa State and Texas Tech, but there may have been a third game where we were down by 17 in the second half and won. I mean, games where we were just being, it was one of those kind of special years. I remember the 2011 year, we played against so many NFL quarterbacks that year. I mean, you look at, Landry Jones obviously is still playing and plays at Pittsburgh behind, a Hall of Famer in Roethlisberger. But we played against Andrew Luck. But you kind of go down the list of quarterbacks that were in the Big 12 we played against and against the offseason. But I forget the guy's name from A&M. That's the quarterback at Miami. We were down against A&M at A&M by like 17 and came back. There were some of those games last year that were special. And the defense, I look at the last game we played. If you look at how we did against Colorado, they were the Pac-10 runner-up, and they really had a good chance to win the Pac-10 last year. And they were the Pac-10 runner-up, and our defense pretty much stymied them the whole game until the very end when they scored late. Offense ran over them. So I like that fact. I'd say that the biggest danger is one of two things. It's losing against Texas at Texas, because I think that Texas quarterback, they finally got a quarterback that seems calm and steady. Texas has got a heck of a linebacker. They've always had great talent. If Herman gets them fired up, and we saw what he did at Houston and especially early in the year, Texas at Texas is going to be a tough game this year. We know that. And then if you look at the OU game, if their quarterback can keep his, women's tennis player headband on straight and keep the food off his shirt and keep from dancing with, the men in blue at 4 a.m., I think they'll still have a very competitive year, and I think he'll be able to keep him in most games.
So very true. All right. Well, take a quick break here, and then we're going to see if maybe we can get Sam to call into the podcast real quick. All right, and we're back, and we also have Sam over the phone now. Sam, how's it going?
Hello, gentlemen.
How's it going, Sam?
So, the Kerry Alexander is in studio, correct?
Yes, he's not flying to a foreign country and assisting or aiding in mother services right now. He's able to stay stateside for a little bit.
Terrorists.
Yeah, he's...
It's not him, because as you all know, he's got very covert missions that prevent him from being on the podcast.
Right, he's staying stateside for a little bit at least. That's that's what he's been telling me at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're pretty sure his whereabouts are right now in Stillwater, Oklahoma, because I can see him. But as far as I know right now,
yeah, we're really blowing his cover right now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
See, I legitimately was in China 48 hours ago.
Well, if you haven't listened to the Stoops, the Intern, and the Ace podcast, Sam goes into great detail about his theory about how my dad, Kerry Alexander, is a CIA agent. And you know what, Sam? Calvin. Sam, every day I think about it and I go, you know what? I'm not so sure you're wrong. You may be just right.
Sure this was your theory, wasn't it?
Oh, well, I think I was like, hey, my dad travels a little bit here and there and stuff like that. And then, the next
kind of let it slip.
Yeah, and then the next conclusion you jumped to, Sam, was that he must be a CIA agent traveling around and fighting off terrorists.
I don't think that's how it went down. I think what happened was we were talking about the Thunder, and then you randomly were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, my dad, he's killed a few terrorists," and we were kind of like, "What? We can't really get off that subject." And then I think that's what happened.
Okay, well, you know what, Sam?
Sound about right, Mr. Alexander?
You got me. You got me.
No comment. No comment, Sam. All right. Well, all right. So the Thunder made another acquisition over the summer, and they officially cleared that last crucial role that I think everyone was really worried about after the offseason ended. And it wasn't Andre Robertson's contract they were really worried about. It was backup point guard.
I think more people. There were a lot of people worried about backup point guard. That seemed to be kind of the most pressing issue, which is kind of weird considering, we still got, what's his name? Russell Westbrook, something like that.
Oh, yeah. The MVP or something.
Yeah, right? I mean, Samaj, I like Samaj. He's what they say, a Thunder guy, but he is what he is. He's limited.
Well, you don't have many backup point guards to an MVP. You don't have any backups to an MVP player. Still playing in summer league. That's not a usual thing on a championship type team. I mean, we don't see the backup to. Well, I mean, the Golden State Warriors are not a good example, but we don't see really like Kyrie Irving and the backups for him playing in summer league.
What's always interesting to me about summer league is, I mean, you can tell pretty quickly the players that don't need to be there. Like, I think, speaking of the Warriors, I think Patrick McCaw was playing in their summer league, and I think he dropped like 28 points or something. Or like a Jason Tatum from Boston. Like, there are always guys that separate themselves in summer league that you're just like, okay, I get it. You should be getting minutes in the big league. But I don't know, Kerry, what did you think about the Raymond Felton signing?
He's been a guy that has had a feisty relationship with Westbrook, and I was kind of curious how Westbrook would respond. There was a lot of trash talking after the Denver series, when he played against Westbrook, and he had a couple comments towards Westbrook about being a team player and that type of thing. But Westbrook came out on top. My guess is that he'll fit in really well. I didn't realize.
Did he? Yeah. What did he say exactly? Because I don't remember that.
Yeah, he talked about well, I'm more concerned about playing well as a team and not my personal stats. And then when the series was over, he talked about Denver hoping that they got him again the next year because he owed the Thunder one and that type of thing. And then he moved on to the next team. But there was a lot of feistiness there, and I think that he's one of those guys that has a real fiery temper that kind of gets after it. And he's also had a lot of success. I was looking back at his college career. You kind of forget what these guys do in college. You look at the draft this year and you think, well, how much does college success translate into the pros? And you look at the number one pick. And, at his Washington career of the great success he had, he wasn't exactly Carmelo Anthony at Syracuse, at the University of Washington.
Nope.
Yeah. And so, but Felton was. I mean, Felton was a guy that he had a bunch of other players that if you look at the roster for, I think it was 2005, but North Carolina won the national championship. If you look at the roster around him, there weren't a lot of guys there that you look back and say, boy, those guys tore up the NBA. And Felton was one of the leaders of that team.
It was, I think that was one of the all-time great, NCAA teams. And he was one of the main guys behind it. And it's funny you brought that up with him, the history with him and Westbrook. Maybe that's a little telling to why he torched us last year, because I think there was some game where when he was with the Clippers, he went off for like maybe 28 or something like that against us.
Yep.
So that being said, I like Raymond Felton a lot. I think he, veteran, solid backup, knows his role. We got him super cheap. it's kind of interesting just because there are a lot of point guard options that could have potentially still been out there. And he's not the greatest outside shooter, but I think all things considered, I thought it was a pretty shrewd move from old Sam Presti.
When we got back from vacation, we were gone for 10 days. And so I went back and watched all of, pardon the interruption, 10 days worth of PTI and just kind of watched it. And of course, they're talking about, will Paul George be going to the Cavs? Yeah, we think the Cavs may have him, but you know what? The Lakers may get him early, but the Celtics are now a player, and on and on and on about who's going to get Paul George. And it's fascinating to listen to it. And I think because they were doing coverage of a golf tournament, I didn't the day where we signed him, and since then they haven't been back on the air. But it was clear that the Thunder weren't even an afterthought. And you think about Presti kind of sitting there wherever he is, working 20 hours a day, and most people thinking that, well, we got one more year, maybe with Westbrook, but more than likely we've got half a season until we trade him, somewhere and get a couple picks, and then we kind of float off into obscurity. Instead, he comes through with Paul George, this time of year, and then we're filling in the gaps. We're re-signing Robertson for, I think, about $2 to $3 million less than what a lot of people thought we'd re-sign him for. I mean, I know that he's limited, but still at $10 million, that's not bad. And then you get
then
you get Felton
at the trade deadline. It was rumored that we offered Robertson we offered him like a 3 or 4 year, $48 million contract.
Well, I think it was 4 years, $48 million.
40. Okay, so 4 years, 48. And no matter the way you slice it, 3 years, 30 is better. So
the market definitely dried up under.
Yeah,
Gary, like you mentioned, he is what he is offensively. I think, people kind of act like he is completely just can't do anything offensively, which he's a really good cutter to the basket. He can work that rover role pretty well. So he's not. I mean, obviously his shot, it is what it is. But I think getting him at 12 a year would have been pretty good. So I agree, getting him at 3 years, $30 million for an elite wing defender. I mean, that's pretty good, especially for this team. And I'm excited just to see. I was excited to see Russ and Depot last year team up. Paul George and I mean, that's unreal. The just the length and the athleticism they have on the wings defensively now.
You look at our team and at the Thunder team, and you say, does Robertson make sense to bring back? And the answer to me was an unequivocal, absolute no. Unless we have an unbelievable scorer to join Westbrook, unless we have a Kevin Durant or maybe a Paul George, because you need someone, you need to have several good scorers or one great scorer to offset Westbrook to afford somebody that's just a defensive player. But if you get Paul George there and you get someone who's a shutdown defender, one of the questions that a lot of the NBA experts have is, are there enough basketballs to go around when you've got, two elite offensive players? You don't really have to have a ton of other options. You need to have a couple spot shooters, and hopefully you need to have Adams get to the level that we thought he'd be at last year, a guy that down low can dominate. And, Jeremy Grant, maybe he'll be that kind of a four that'll be able to emerge and do some damage athletically as well. But you definitely have a chance with George to score, where Robertson can just do his defensive piece and focus on that, and hopefully maybe make a few more foul shots toward the end.
Well, this will be a huge opportunity for Paul George in my book, because he won't have to be that guy locking down. Because in Indy, he's the best defender on the court, pretty much for, the 1 through 4 position. Maybe Miles Turner is a better defender at the 5 than Paul George. But now Paul George can kind of, I can kind of just play more offensively. Won't have to worry that much about defensively when they've got a guy like Robertson on the court. I mean, we matched up and we played the Rockets or we play the Spurs.
It's not about this right now again.
This is amazing.
This is amazing. I can't believe it.
Because before this,
we got so spoiled, I think, as a franchise and fan base. It's awesome again.
Well, I think before the offseason started, no one in the entire world, besides Sam Presti, had any idea that this was a possibility. And then all of a sudden you go, okay, let's trade away Victor Oladipo, who is not on a good contract for how good of a player he is. let's trade away a rookie asset who played 1 year, didn't show a ton of promise, but could be good offensively in the future. His footwork looked promising in college,
he was a bad matchup with Russ.
But Sabonis just wasn't great, and Sabonis isn't a guy who's taking a lot of like shots from. He's not taking a lot of like Ibaka-ish shots, where it's like jumpers or stuff like that. Sabonis was taking what seemed like a lot of kind of post ups and stuff like that down low, which eats into Adams' territory. And then all of a sudden Presti pulls off his amazing, wondrous, magical wizard stick, and he basically goes out and makes this trade, which everyone thinks that Sam Presti is just a genius for the trade. There's no one, who thinks that Presti made a bad trade with this. And who knows, maybe in 10 years we'll look back at me differently, but not right now, of course. And I don't think anyone's thinking that in the future, short term either. I have a 1 year Paul George to really take this Thunder team to a level that we've been to in the past, of course, and recently, but just right back to it, right back in the mixture where I think it's arguable. A couple things go our way, a couple things work out perfectly, and we're the 2 seed in the West. I don't think that's too far-fetched.
No, I don't either. And what's beautiful about the whole deal that not a lot of people, it's when you trade for Paul George, you're not going to be thinking about a year from now necessarily. But what I love about it is there's an emergency, break that they can pull on this whole thing. So, worst case scenario, if things don't work out, they can move Paul George as an asset, get something back, essentially try to recoup what we couldn't get for a Durant sign and trade. The fact that we can offer him more money now for his max extension, might make us more attractive if he decides to stay. Or again, we could do a sign and trade after a year of having Paul George. It still hasn't sunk in. I was kind of bummed that they didn't do a press conference, because I needed that closure on the deal. Part of me is still kind of like, well, what happens, even though there's no way we'd have to trade him, but you know how it is being an Oklahoma fan. But it's so amazing what Presti has done, and I think for someone that's not even from here, talk about Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Can we get him in the Hall of Fame immediately? Because he's somehow made Oklahoma City the center of the not only basketball world but the sports world over a holiday weekend. That's pretty insane, just in its own context.
In the modern NBA and the kind of money that these players make, we lose sight of the fact that where you live is kind of different than where we live. Where we live, it's basically 24/7, 365, maybe a vacation here or there, but that's where we are. If you're in the NBA during the season, half the year you're traveling maybe on road trips up to a week at a time, but a lot of times you have an entire road trip. You're gone for a better part of a week. Even when you're here, it's practice games, and then in the off season, you can hop a jet and go wherever you want to go. You can have a house wherever. LeBron spends most of his time not in Cleveland, but in Los Angeles, where he has his house in the off season. And so Paul George may very well want to be a big star for the Lakers because that's a name on a jersey that he really respects and likes a lot. But he could still live in LA and do all he wants to do and still be out in Los Angeles if he wanted to. But, the team you're with is the big deal. Kevin Durant went to go play not for the Golden State Warriors, but he's playing in Oakland. Now, they'll move the team at some point, but he's playing in Oakland. And Paul George, it's one thing to be from California. And I think from Oklahoma, you see California as one big palm tree and beach. But there's a big difference between Malibu and Palmdale, where Paul George is from, or from Fresno. And so, for example, if you're in Malibu looking out at the ocean and you want to go to Palmdale, it is a hike. And Fresno, it's about like going, you could fly from Oklahoma to Malibu faster than you can drive to Fresno. And if you ever watched a Rose Bowl,
traffic is the worst out there.
Well, and just the number of miles. But if you've ever watched a Rose Bowl game, the Rose Bowl is played about an hour. I lived in California for 10 years. Calvin. He was born in California, so that's where we lived when he was born. And if you drive about an hour east, you can get to Pasadena, where the Rose Bowl is. And if you've ever watched a Rose Bowl game on a snowy, cold day in the Midwest and seen the beautiful Rose Bowl, and January 1st, and in the background they've got the beautiful, way, way off to the east, the San Gabriel Mountains, and you've thought to yourself, I know that to the west, the beautiful Pacific Ocean's out there. I wonder way, way, way beyond the San Gabriel Mountains. I wonder what's way out there beyond that. Well, the answer are two things. One, the desert. Two, Palmdale. So it's not like Paul George grew up, playing a beach frisbee with the buddies down in Malibu. It's he grew up in an area quite a bit different than Los Angeles, and so maybe that's where he wants to be ultimately. But I kind of think that if he and Westbrook get something going, they pick up a third guy and end up doing well. Going back to his roots in Armpit, California is not a reality. It's going to be living in Oklahoma City with a team with one of the best, most exciting players that he could possibly play with, and then vacationing wherever the heck he wants to might be pretty persuasive to him down the road.
Also, the Lakers, Paul George, a big brand of his image, and Rory Sung tweeted this out. A big thing of Paul George's image is when he changed his number from 24, which I believe is the numbers he played in college as, is to number 13. They have the nickname and everything, PG-13, all that type of stuff. Well, I don't know if Paul George has really thought about it or really made a lot of improvements, but number 13 has been retired by the Lakers. So if Paul George wants to be PG-14, go for it. But that branding and stuff like that, and the name behind, and I don't know how much thought and stuff like that is really worth, but it seems like enough would be where it'd be, okay, well, all right, I've got to, that's not the easiest thing in the entire world, you got to think some thoughts behind that. And also, a lot of me thinks that if you're in Indiana, and you're on a team that just perennially just gets beat the crap out of, by the Cavs or by whoever they play that year in the Eastern Conference, the front office has Frank Vogel and then makes a change and then, has, goes through a bunch of different roster changes, comes out this offseason before Paul George was traded and says Lance Stevenson is going to be our point guard, moving forward and stuff like that. A guy who wasn't on an NBA roster for parts of last season and then joined to the Indiana for the playoffs. And you hear all that type of stuff. Part of me kind of goes, okay, well, maybe Paul George just said, hey, I want to go to the Lakers because I want the heck out of here. And how much of that is really, okay, it has to be, I know, it's easy. Hey, I want to go back home and play for the Lakers. Well, if you're an Indianapolis fan, okay, well, all right, that kind of, that's hard to live with of the star player leaving, but it's kind of like, okay, well, he wants to leave and he wants to go home. That's one thing versus him just saying, I want to get out of here. And that helps his, image and reputation as much as we've seen previous NBA players, cough, KD, the snake, and his reputation get tarnished by making moves. And so, part of me kind of goes, okay, maybe Paul George is just, working with the scheme of things of, hey, you know what? Hey, guys, I'm not going to resign. And if I have a choice, I'm going to resign with the Lakers because that's where I'm from. And, how much of that is really, no matter what, I'm signed with the Lakers in, a year, no matter what, And I've heard certain commentators, Tony Kornheiser and other guys like that say, they give X team, whoever gets Paul George before the Lakers, if a team does, a 10 to 15% fighting chance that he'll stay. Well, heck, I'd take a 10 to 15% chance that Paul George will stay in Oklahoma City with an MVP, with a player who just came off an MVP season. Looks like he's at the top of his game amongst none. A general manager who makes roster moves to get a 37% three-point shooter as a power forward, a rising star in a center who's younger than I am, shooting guard who can lock down anyone on the defensive side, and point guard, and then signs a small forward who, has made perennial all-star teams.
Was there a 10 to 15% chance?
Other than R.C. Buford and Pat Riley, there's no one that you would put above Sam Presti. I think he's clearly a top 3 GM. I think our biggest selling point with Paul George is going to be just winning. And I think it's the thing with the Lakers. It's going to be hard if Paul George is on a team with a Russell Westbrook, and say we win 55 plus games, we go to the Western Conference Finals, and the Lakers win 25 games, which is probably realistic for them this year. I find that it's going to be hard for him to want to leave us for that, unless you're throwing LeBron into the whole equation, which you never know. But I agree. I think it's a little bit of a reach right now because, a lot can happen in a month, much less a year.
Well, one of the questions is whether or not Westbrook is thinking about going west too. Westbrook's got a year left, and you wonder if Westbrook's going to re-sign with us this summer, if he and George are going to do something together.
Well, let me ask you this, Kerry, since we were just talking about the California and the whole landscape, because a lot of people are, it's mostly media. They're looking at it this way, where they think it could actually be a bad thing, because since they're both from LA or California, Southern California, that they might both leave and decide. Do you think that it helps, as far as convincing Paul George to stay, do you think it helps that Russ is from LA and he can kind of be like, look, enjoy LA in the summer? Or do you think it's bad because he can also then be like, hey man, let's go home and team up?
It depends on how you're wired. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when I was a kid and coming out of high school and had some options about going to college, and I ended up having a full ride opportunity academically to go to Oklahoma State or OU. And I'd been to OU I went to every OU home game from the time I can remember through the time I graduated. Calvin and I were talking on the way up. OU plays OSU in an early game and in a late game that may determine whether or not they're playing for the national championship. They're going up to Ohio State to play. And the last time they played at Ohio State, I was there to watch them when Uwe von Schamann kicked the field goal to beat Ohio State and Woody Hayes in the 1970s. And I went to not only every Nebraska game in Norman, I went to most of them in Lincoln when I was a kid growing up. But when it came down to it, something about going to a school that's more of an underdog, going to a place where you can kind of create something that is your own, makes some sense. And I think some players are wired that way. I think sometimes you look at it and you go, Oklahoma City, I can do something here as Russell Westbrook. I can put a stamp here where they'll always remember me. This is something that I'll be known for. I'll be known as the guy, the Bill Russell of Boston, or whatever you want to say. I'll be known as the guy versus, when the latest flavor of the month was picked by the Lakers, and it's like, hey, see those 20 jerseys over there? Well, yours might be 21 up there on the wall if you turn out well. I mean, that kind of thing. It depends how the player's wired, and I think that a lot of players, I would think, if the money is really good, if you can make a ton and get a ton of attention, your commercial opportunities are great. If you can be the NBA MVP in Oklahoma City and you have a chance to win championships, I mean, heck, I don't see why you wouldn't stay if you can have all those things and solid management. And I think the surrounding cast, Sam, what do you think about the other player they brought in, the one we haven't talked about yet? What do you think about Patrick Patterson?
I love it. It's one of the stats that really kind of blew my mind with him was he actually made more threes than Alex Abrinas did last year, which I think I can't. Calvin, you probably know the number.
It's like 90 or something.
Last year, but
Abrinas, just for Thunder references here, Abrinas made more 3-pointers last season as a rookie than any other Thunder rookie. Just as a heads up. He had like 90-something 3-pointers in the season, which is still pretty crazy.
Yeah. And then I saw something else. He's 41% Patrick Patterson from the corner, which is going to be really, he's going to be stepping up in kind of a Serge Ibaka role. But, I love Taj Gibson. We should hashtag free Taj with his little incident he had today with a suspended license. But I like Taj, and I like him defensively, and I don't think Patterson's as good defensively, but I think he's more versatile. So I think he can have an easier time maybe switching out on wings, and then he's obviously got way more range than Taj does. So I love it. And the fact that, Presti's really taking advantage of this, of there not being a whole lot of money left to spend, especially with the salary cap being lower than what people thought. I really do love the move. I think sliding him in there, now having Paul George, him to space the floor, and then being able to bring, McDermott, Abrinas, Jeremy Grant, and, they're talking about trying to maybe get Canner to kind of space out his range a little bit. I love the move, though. Again, it's hard to, at this point, it's kind of like, and I think it's why it's so confusing that there's a small part of the fan base that doesn't like Presti. It's just, to get a guy like him who's a starter on a playoff team that made a run last year for what is it, $4 million a season? That's
That's crazy.
Really good.
And that hashtag Fire Presti group is getting smaller by the second now with all the offseason moves he's made.
I mean, that's just embarrassing. And if you ask me, and I know we're all OSU men here, but if you ask me, that's OU, the OU fan part. I mean, just the spoiled, every year fire Bob Stoops garbage because he doesn't go undefeated and beat Nick Saban. I think a little bit comes from that, but it's almost embarrassing, and I'm glad that. I mean, I certainly no one's saying that now, especially after the PG trade, but yeah, it was a little because I mean, this guy really does. He's put Oklahoma City on the map. I mean, unbelievable job that this guy has done.
In fairness to OU fans, I think it's actually those kind of fans are the OU fans' Walmart campus. Those whose only real tie to
Kerry, we're not going to be fair to OU fans on this podcast. I don't know what Calvin told you, but
you got to have a Bedlam brother, and so I at least I had about 17 years. But it's those OU fans that bought a T-shirt and they think they've got to overcompensate because that's their only connection to OU is they went by Walmart and bought $9.99 of red clothing, and that's the only commitment they have. But here's something about Patterson that really surprised me. So I looked up some of the history of the new three players, and Felton surprised me that he was a little bit older. I didn't realize he'd been in the league, over a decade. But both.
Was he a senior when he came out of North Carolina?
I think he was a junior, and on that team, I looked it up, and I think McCants. There were a couple other players. Rashard McCants was just a dynamic player. There weren't a lot of just NBA superstars that were on that roster, even potential ones from that time that got injured and didn't play well. But so he came out in 2005, I think. But both Paul George and Patterson came out in 2010. But check out the Kentucky roster. Patterson's a Kentucky Wildcat. His senior year, Patterson's senior year, the head coach was in his first year at Kentucky, a head coach named John Calipari. And let me throw a couple names at you as to who else is on that roster. And Patterson was a star. Locally, Daniel Orton went there, and I think OU would have loved to have had him then. I think he was looking at OU, and he might have paired up with some of the players they had back then and didn't well. But they had some
probably would have had a better career too.
I wouldn't doubt it at all. But they had some players that we've seen bounce around the league. So I'll mention those first, then get to the bigger names. But DeAndre Liggins and Eric Bledsoe, which obviously played with the Thunder for a while and has done really well as kind of a role player. And they had a couple other names that I recognize. But how about these other two that were on that team? Number one, how about John Wall? And,
I've heard of him. I've heard of him.
And then Boogie Cousins.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a heck of a team. And they obviously they had some younger players and everything else, and they had an extremely good year. You look at their season; I think they went like 15-0, and then lost a game, and then they ran off another 10, and then lost a game. They only lost, I think, 3 games all year. They got knocked out in the East Region Finals, and I think they were the number 2 seed, but they got knocked off by West Virginia. In the finals, but Patterson was leading rebounder in about half the games, a little less than half the games, and then Cousins was in the rest. But what an incredible roster! But that guy's been a dynamite every step of the way. And if you get a chance, Google Patrick Patterson and practical jokes. Some of his YouTube videos, he's got a bunch of good ones. He's a big movie freak, but he has these videos of where he has painted some of the rookies' cars with multicolored Post-it notes. It's actually worth pulling up.
Oh, that's great.
Pretty good.
So it seems like kind of a good fit, good-natured, team-oriented, and Paul George too. It seems like there's a nucleus here. You kind of wonder what's going to happen down the road if there's maybe one more piece that we're thinking about or something else that might shift. You never know what's going to happen with the Clippers. Will they blow up? With the Lakers, I'm still not convinced that there's an ownership group there that can pull it off. Magic Johnson makes some sense, but you read a little bit deeper. The Buss family is at war. The 2 older sons and I think there are 5 kids altogether, but Jeannie Buss is kind of the one that's taking control now. But the 2 older sons are fighting like crazy with Jeannie Buss. And then there is a younger daughter, I think, and then maybe even a younger son, but it's a complete war over control of the Lakers with Jeannie Buss taking charge. That thing may be in such chaos that who knows if that's going to be a viable option for anybody within the next year or two, and that timing kind of works out well for us maybe.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad to see over there because Jim Buss was such a legend. I mean, and such a, not only just for the NBA but just for the game. I mean, just a revolutionary front office member, and then his son is just a complete worthless, you know. And apparently the daughter got all the good DNA in that deal, but. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of question marks that doesn't necessarily make this the for sure thing that I think especially the national media is kind of trying to spin here.
Speaking of good DNA, and I know this just from reading it in the newspaper, not from personal knowledge, but Jeannie Buss was a Playboy model as well. So see, there's all kinds of stuff in her history. But Jerry Buss, he was a real estate guy, and he was an incredible operator back in those days. For a while, I was buddies with the head of security for the Forum, and I had a chance to kind of hang out there in the VIP room. Long story there, but I used to hang out in that room, and Jerry Buss would come cruising in, and all those stories about him coming in with, 2 or 3 nice-looking females in his entourage were all true. It was kind of spectacular being back there and seeing him cruising.
He deserves it. He ran the greatest or second greatest franchise in NBA history for a few decades. Good for him.
And it was Showtime. I mean, it was one of those things that was that recent series that ESPN did. They did it without Bill Simmons, which is kind of amazing because I thought that those movies they did died off once Simmons had left. But that 2-night series they did on Celtics versus the Lakers. That was spectacular, and it really did capture that dynamic. When they had those teams together, the talent that the Lakers had, and then the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics had a lot of guys with injuries. Bird was an injury away, and then McHale played one year, really played himself into permanent injuries on his legs. And then Bill Walton was just a walking injury for a lot of those years. You kind of look at those guys, just a bunch of really kind of hobbled, crippled kind of guys. And then you had the Lakers, which were just gazelles. These guys could run, and they were Showtime as fast as can be. Those were some incredible years to see. But right now we're dealing with, it's kind of like we were saying about, the next generation. You just don't know with the OU coaching change. You get Stoops for, a decade plus. You don't know what the next generation is going to bring. It's not automatic. People take it for granted, but it's not automatic that someone's going to step in and do well. Same thing's true with the Lakers. It's not automatic that someone's going to pick up the mantle and run with it, and that's going to be a viable franchise that is going to attract players of the caliber of Westbrook and George. And they may just take a look and say, you know what? This isn't a bad gig in Oklahoma City. It's a nice place to be, and we can travel wherever we want to in the world the other 8 months a year and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially since the Lakers have been so, it's, you hear about, like you said, Showtime, Lakers, Magic Johnson, but the hard reality of the situation, they haven't been able to recruit any big-time free agents to come there. Buss's kid ran the organization into the ground with contracts like Mozgov and all that. And they're putting a lot of eggs in that LeBron basket. It's like, if he doesn't decide to come there, kind of like you said, it's so much pressure being like, if you're Lonzo Ball, it's different than being in an Oklahoma City where you get time to actually, if I suck, I'm not going to get booed off the court, or there's not going to be a million reporters asking me questions. Like, you get more, and plus, how the Thunder players are here, people don't hardly ever bother them. They kind of describe it as a weird feeling because they don't get hounded, and this is where they play. So just being able to have not all that stress, I think, definitely makes it easier.
Yeah,
but,
and
we've been saying this for a while, and
yeah,
and I think it's telling that the biggest free agent contract we signed, Patrick Patterson.
Yeah,
I think the next one underneath that was Nenad Kristic. So it's hard to get people to stay, but it's definitely gonna give Paul George something to think about if Russ signs that extension and we go out and win 55 plus games and.
Well, it seems like to me
the Warriors
too that Raymond Felton signing for the veterans minimum so that we weren't hard capped and we could sign Robertson for what we did, or vice versa. I forget exactly how it played out. That's helpful, and as guys, as I think as a team, as you see the Thunder play and really the Thunder, I think everyone expects to do really, really well this next season, better than last season, of course, with the addition of Paul George and the free agents, stuff like that. I don't think anyone's saying the Thunder are going to do worse. And when you keep building success, eventually the free agents will come to a team and players, or a player in Westbrook, that are on the rise. And I don't think that the Thunder are in any bit of a downturn whatsoever right now. And this next season's a huge chance to really make a lot of success going forward.
What's such a benefit about the way Paul George plays is I don't think. I mean, if you consider possible free agents we could have gotten, I mean, the only one I can think of that might be a better fit next to Russ would maybe be Klay Thompson. But, I mean, I don't think it's going to take a whole lot of time for their games to mesh, just because Paul George is so good at catching and shooting. He's so good off the ball. He's not – his weaknesses are easy for Russ to mask and vice versa. And just the space he's going to give, Kerry, you talked about Adams earlier and how he's going to have space. You know what I mean? Like, teams aren't going to have 5 guys in the paint just to worry about Russell driving. I mean, he's going to get some lobs again. It's a great pairing. I think that also makes the case better, because Paul George is going to make his life a million times easier. When Russ checks out of a game, he doesn't have to be worried about being down 10 points when he comes back. I love it. It's great.
I think that if I'm Presti, I think the pitch to Paul George and Westbrook is this. One thing that you're going to miss out if you stay in Oklahoma City is you're not going to be part of the new reality show that LeVar Ball has announced that he's putting together. That it's gonna be on the air next year. So that'll be one thing you'll miss out on, is the LeVar Ball reality show. So that's a negative. But the stability of the franchise here is incredible, and both you guys can have the same type of situation in Oklahoma City that we saw Tim Duncan and crew have in San Antonio. You can have that situation here, and you can have it you can be competitive during your prime years. You're not going to have a situation where you're going to be there in LA. And I guess if both go, in theory, I guess they would have a tremendous talent level right off the start. Whoever was around them could join them. But the overall stability of the franchise just isn't. You can't think they have that same stability of leadership they have with Presti. I think Presti is the selling point, and I really haven't heard a lot of scuttlebutt among people that I'm around about firing Presti and season ticket holders, those kind of people that talk about that. Because Presti, I mean, what he's done is just amazing. And I think the thought of keeping Harden back when we had a chance to keep him, it would have been great to have him, but we really didn't. I mean, we really didn't have to have him to win it all. Had Durant had a better game, or even Wes had a better game in Game 6 last year against Golden State, we might have had a trophy already. Had we not had
5.
Or Game 5.
I don't think Durant showed up in either of those games.
Had we not had a couple injuries, the 2 previous years, we might have had a trophy already. So I think it was other things that were a factor, and not just you not having Harden there. And you kind of look at it and you say, Presti has done a great job assembling a highly competitive team. And the moves this offseason, when it looked like all hope was lost, getting Westbrook to commit was a huge deal. Very impressive, but looking at what he did to say, hey, we're here for a while, we're here to be competitive, I'm impressed with what he's done, and I think that's a lot to sell.
Yeah, and I think, his biggest criticism, like you said, going back to the Harden trade, it's easy to analyze a trade that's taken out of context, and yeah, people forget no one forgets that one year we had where everybody got injured, but we had 3 seasons in a row where Durant goes down, Russ goes down, and then Serge goes down in the Western Conference Finals. And it's you're absolutely correct. And the year after we made that Harden trade, we won 60 games, and we're looking like we were going to go to the finals again. And then Patrick Beverley happens. So it's easy to, to have that being able to look back at something. But yeah, I agree with you. Just the fact that he's made us not just relevant. People were kind of bringing up the Atlanta Hawks type thing and how they always seem to be that 4, 5, 6 seed. Forget that. He made us contenders for however many years in a row. Like, we weren't just making the playoffs and crossing our fingers. It's,
Well, he's the guy.
I think
he's the guy that
he's
saw
put us in a position to where, and the one thing I keep thinking about is, if Russ doesn't sign the extension and Russ ends up playing somewhere else, obviously it's going to be devastating. It's going to suck. I'm going to cry a lot, but I know our franchise can come back. When those rumors were coming around about Sam Presti and the Knicks, that is, to me, a different story. Like, that is threatening, like, the whole stability of our franchise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that puts a chill in my spine that it's like, okay, we can lose a superstar, but we still got Presti. He'll make us good. You know what? But if we lose him, I mean, forget about it. You know what I mean?
Totally. Totally. As we kind of head toward the finish line, looking at by the way, one thought about Presti. I mean, he is also the guy that figured out Westbrook was that good. Nobody thought he was that good. Nobody thought
he just, to this day, does not get enough credit for that.
No, and everybody said he can't be a point guard and can't be this, and they still say that to some extent. But I mean, he obviously is phenomenal. So I think that he's showed his critics were way off. And Steven, I mean, everybody brings in, he seems to have a pretty good idea, and they do pretty well. But looking at Kevin Durant and the Warriors, one of the most painful topics I can think of to bring up to finish, but looking at Kevin Durant, I have a little bit different perspective about Kevin Durant than I did, maybe a few weeks ago, and certainly since last July 4th. Last July 4th, I was at an event, and a neighbor walked up and said, "Hey, have you heard what just happened?" And I think every time I think about that moment up until watching him celebrate with the trophy, I've just felt this sickening feeling, because whenever I saw Kevin Durant, it was almost immediately, it's almost like you guys are so young, but you have that woman or that young girl that you're crazy about, and you see her, and then you realize that you've broken up and she's with somebody else. And there's that flash of kind of a feeling. And that's the way it was with him. I think most of us thought so highly of him and respected him so much and really enjoyed him being part of what we had. And I really felt so disappointed about the way he handled it, the way that he moved on. But I don't think there's a good way for that to happen. But the one way I have more sympathy about what he did, and maybe I can kind of let that go and move on and enjoy what the Thunder are doing. I read an article about how serious the foot fracture was. And maybe it at least kicked into my thoughts that maybe he's concerned about his career being far shorter than what he thought it might be. That Jones fracture he had, it not only did he, I mean, I think we lived through it, so we remember some of the history, but the behind the scenes stuff, he not only had the break, but then he had the graft that was put on it, and then it rebroke. And there was some thought that he might not be able to walk normally. So we talk about Bill Walton hobbling through his last few years with the Celtics. I mean, nobody has come back from a Jones fracture that has played professional basketball at this level like Kevin Durant has. And he's obviously was really good with us last year, and was phenomenal with Golden State this year, even though he got dinged up again. But he may not be a player that's around much more than a couple more years. And he may have thought, I may not have much more of a chance to reach for the ring. So I still am frustrated by the way he left, the way he kind of talked about us, and it still hurts the fact that he left. But part of me says he did a ton of good while he was here. He did re-sign with us on that first contract, and I guess I'm not going to celebrate him winning or be happy that he went with the team that had its feature player that recruited him the whole time, that was best known for hitting us where we hurt, plus LeBron and plus everybody else. But I do have more sympathy maybe for the reasons why he may have made the change. But I'm curious what you guys think about the Warriors winning the championship.
Very mad. I don't think I'm happy at all. I mean, that's what you're saying too, though, is they're not happy. But the Warriors are the team to me that I think it was. Well, okay, let's see here. So they just won their second championship in 3 years. So that the year they won that first championship, it was kind of like sad but fun to watch. Like, it was annoying but fun to watch, because clearly I'm a Thunder fan and stuff like and rooting hard for them, and that's the only team I'm rooting for in the Western Conference by far. And I'm not really a fan of any team in the East. Maybe a player or two, but that's really it. And I think that first season they went and they won the championship. and they beat Cleveland the first year.
A bit of an asterisk because Love had his arm ripped off.
Because Love had his arm ripped off. Kyrie played half of game one, and LeBron was out there by himself. But the year that they were playing basketball, then it seemed nuanced almost how they were playing, spreading the floor, had a ton of 3-point shooters. It was kind of fun, interesting, good, fun to watch basketball. And then the year after that, it was just, it got annoying. Just annoying as crap. All their players seemed very arrogant. Steph Curry comes out with these, these commercials, where, he's always has his kids up on the stand, stuff like that. And to me, that's cool, your family and stuff like that. But your family doesn't need to be on stage with you on the mic, stuff like that. And there's a very, very real difference in my mind here, just for a second, taking a side route. But Isaiah Thomas having his kids up there after his sister dies is very, very different than Steph Curry basically making his daughter the spotlight of the entire, postseason that we're always going to remember about and stuff like that, that everyone talked about this season when she wasn't up there. It was like, oh no, where is Steph Curry's kid? And Steph Curry basically deflecting any hard questions about the entire series and stuff like that when he's the MVP of, of stuff. And, he's the MVP the last year, that year and then the year after that one as well. And that always seems weird. The comments Draymond makes, anytime Draymond wins anything, he makes a comment as though he's basically, where he thinks he's better than MJ or thinks he's better than the best player in the world. He goes like right after LeBron, stuff like that. It's just extremely arrogant. And then, you've got just the Warriors management saying that they have, the thing that really ticks me off about the Warriors right now, lately, is that the Warriors saying that we are light years ahead, management wise, of any other team. Are the Warriors smart for drafting Steph Curry? Yes. But but the Timberwolves are dumb for drafting 2-point guards before Steph Curry, so the Warriors, in my mind, had a little bit of luck there going into the situation. Of course, they had Johnny Flynn, and
they could underpay Steph Curry,
because of his ankles and
years of his life.
Steph Curry's
everything possible.
Steph Curry's ankles have been better since then, but Draymond Green, Draymond Green's been annoying, and Klay Thompson, has been a good player as well. But what's really irritating is that the Warriors, Warriors are going, well, hey, we've had all this success and stuff like this, and it's because we've really, we're light years ahead of other teams. When the Warriors got really lucky that David Lee got injured, and then they were able to play Draymond Green, his rookie year, and Draymond Green was able to basically accelerate his, NBA learning curve. If David Lee doesn't get hurt, then the Warriors are still playing basketball just like everyone else, and they're not having this small ball, this 6'7", guy who can step out and shoot threes playing center for a lot of the time for them. And they lucked in that situation more than anything else. It's annoying that the Warriors win. And it's annoying what they do after they win and how that it is just everywhere all over media. I understand the Warriors made history last season, and they almost made history this season if they'd been able to beat the Cavs, and they almost, without the Cavs winning one game. And that's an amazing feat, but it's annoying to me that the Warriors have this kind of arrogance of we're better than everyone else and we're so much better than everyone else.
Yeah, it basically comes down, they couldn't beat the Cavs, and then they got Kevin Durant, which most teams don't get a chance to sign the second best player in the league. I don't think I've felt any positive emotions since they won a title. I feel like I'm like, what was that antidepressant commercial they used to have where the circle was just bummed out all the time? And he's just like, that's what I felt like since they won. And what's even more depressing about it is it's not good for the game. Like, you go from having, it's almost like watching Premier League soccer at this point, because it's like, there are only 3-4 teams at most that have a chance at actually winning the whole thing. And now you're getting all these teams that, not middle of the road teams, but we're talking middle seeded teams in the playoffs, where it's like not the Jazz, like the Clippers now. It's just no one, like, they're not good enough to win a title. So all these teams that in the past would be competing are basically all trying to out-tank each other. And it's just the level of parity is going to, there's just a huge drop-off, because now, people keep calling it an arms race. That's what it is. Like, ever since this maneuver, it's like everybody's trying to, because that's what you need to beat the Warriors, and it's I don't like it. It's not a good direction it's going. I don't, I'm with you, Kerry. I would have not liked him going to the Warriors because it's kind of like, bully punches you in the mouth. You don't want to go hang out with the bully right after. But it's just the way he left it and tried to throw everyone under the bus. And, really kind of showed his true colors a little bit there. But, it is what it is. It's hard not to be bitter about it, especially considering it's like we make a move like add Paul George, and more than likely it's still probably not enough to compete with them. But I definitely think a lineup of Russ, Dre, Paul George, Patrick Patterson, and Adams, I think that definitely is a team that's probably the most ready built to play the Warriors as far as defensively.
It's funny because you look at them player by player, and I think that the team we would have put on the court this past year with Durant would have been significantly better than the team that Golden State would have put on the court without Durant.
Absolutely. That would have been a super team right there.
And I'm, obviously now with George, it's a different deal, but Durant was so much better that it's just astonishing how well he played. He was dominant. In the games against Oklahoma City, he was dominant. In the games of the playoff, he was dominant. And I truly wish he would have had those kind of games coming down the stretch in the Golden State series last year. And I wish they hadn't been texting each other and doing all that stuff. And I wish that Golden State had knocked us out by literally punching us where it hurt over and over again by the same guy that recruited Durant. And they needed the same thing to LeBron, and that's why and no one talks about this much. That's why Golden State lost last year. Had Draymond, if he was able to keep his hands to himself, he would have been able to play, and he wouldn't have been. I think him being out of the game is why they had to go to Game 7, and that's why they lost. It definitely
would have been a different series against us if he would have gotten suspended for that second, kick he had against Steven.
Yeah, and the game he would have been suspended for, we ended up winning anyway, but it would have changed the dynamic. But I guess from where I stand, two last comments, and one is that it is funny to hear other teams such as Boston and Cleveland talk about super teams and how LeBron complained about super teams when that's exactly what LeBron did in Miami, and that's exactly what he tried to do, bringing in Kevin Love to play in Cleveland. And that's exactly what Boston did when they brought in the players they did for their last championship. So that gets a little bit old hearing other teams complain about what Golden State does. I don't care a great deal for Golden State. Calvin said I get annoyed at Stephen Curry, but he's hard to see as a huge villain. Draymond Green's about as unappealing a player as I've seen play in quite a while. But I think a lot of Steve Kerr. I look at his character and what he did. Even in college going back, and I won't go through all that, but he's one of those guys I have a lot of respect for. But I look at what the Thunder are putting together, and I think, they may be a player away. They may need a little bit more. Someone like Grant, if he were to emerge as a really good player, one of those guys you don't expect to, like Green, you don't expect, but suddenly he emerges as a really strong player. They may be that close to stepping up, because if you've got the NBA MVP, and you've got a player like Paul George, and you've got a couple really strong players, like one of the best young centers in the game, and a couple other, a strong defensive player. It's a huge stopper. You just kind of go, this team's got enough to compete. And if we get another player to pop up, or maybe someone else to fall to us, we might be able to be there. So cross our fingers. And like I said, Kevin Durant, I do feel a little bit, if he's truly worried about a really short career, I think he could have done it here as well as he could have out there, but it makes a little more sense as to his thought process of just jumping on the bandwagon and grabbing a quick title. Doesn't say a lot for his competitive nature, but it makes a little more sense.
Yeah, and last comment I'll make, I totally agree with you your point about the roster. We had the youngest roster in the playoffs, so guys like, it's, and I keep reminding myself because I forget, but it's like Adams is 23. Guys like him, Abrinas, even McDermott, Cantor, all those guys are still improving. So you never know what could happen next year. Abrinas could show up and be Manu Ginobili, and all of a sudden, we're winning 70 games. So you never really know when it comes to just player development, but I trust our organization up there with the best as far as that goes. But anyway, I'm gonna have to bounce now. Mr. Alexander, it was a pleasure as always. I just have my last question before I go. When your neighbor asked you that Kevin Durant question last year on the 4th of July, did you break his neck or did you let him live?
You know, what's funny is he is an ESPN employee, and he was actually kind of breaking news. He said it was finally able to release it. And I just think whenever I see him nowadays, I have to look at his eyes to see if he's happy or sad when he walks up to me. Now, he's an OSU alum, so when he's sad, it may not be entirely bad news for an OSU alum. But when he walked up, I just still think about that moment going, oh, man.
All right, Sam.
Well, Kerry Alexander, always rubbing shoulders with the higher-ups.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, Sam, and we will catch you on the next one here. All right. See you, man.
Alrighty. Bye.
All right, well, do you have your Everyone Hates for the week? Because it was about that time.
You know, since we've been talking about what everyone hates, I think it has to be, for me, looking at the end of the NBA playoffs, it has to be Draymond Green. He has to be the one that is absolutely despicable. So when I think about the kids going to see Despicable Me, it has to be Draymond Green. Cannot imagine a more despicable player and anybody that I would rather nominate for the Everyone Hates Award.
There we go. Well, Draymond Green, definitely everyone hates him. I can most certainly agree with that one, of course. My Everyone Hates from this past week is going to be Lonzo Ball. Of course, he... and it might not be directly at Lonzo Ball, but it's pretty much everyone who judges Lonzo Ball's very first game in Summer League as a horrible, miserable failure. I in no way want to be associated with defending Lonzo Ball, but it's NBA Summer League. So as Sam said a little bit earlier, it's kind of one of those things where you kind of know if you're supposed to be there or not. And Jason Tatum scoring 27 points and 11 rebounds is, well, probably not supposed to be in Summer League, but is, to get some good playing time. And then you've got, Lonzo Ball having a triple-double in his second Summer League game, so how much does it really mean? And then his first Summer League game was bad, and how long... It's Summer League. You can't overdo a lot, it just... not a ton of it means a ton of stuff, because a lot of those guys who are on either roster or playing D-League, the G League now, this next season, you're not really facing off against a lot of good NBA talent, especially if... someone's really trying to say, okay, well, Lonzo Ball missed, a couple of, 3-point shots from deep to win a game. Well, if Lonzo Ball's your 3-point shooter to end a game for the Lakers, that's not a position you want to be in, especially with Lonzo Ball's, his 3-point shot had a good percentage in college, but it's not a good looking shot by any means, and you're not going to try to depend him down the stretch to win you games from 3 points at least,
Why not think glasses half full? He made 2 of 15.
That's true. You know what? 2 of 15. You only missed 13 shots. You're right. Very, very true. Well, as we ended out here on the podcast, one last segment, of course, to get to, which is Calvin's conspiracy theories. And my conspiracy theory for this week, I think any fan of Oklahoma and the state of Oklahoma and football is going to be in for this one. So last season, being born in the San Diego area and living there for a little bit, I'm still having family out there. I'm well versed in the whole Chargers moving to, LA-ish right now. I believe I can't remember exactly what city they're in, but next season they're playing at MLS Stadium with 32,000 seats. And for whatever reason, the Chargers decided that's where they want to play, the 32,000 seat MLS Stadium. So the Raiders decided to stay where they're at before their stadium's built, but the Chargers decided, nope, we're going to go ahead and move already. So the Spanos decided to just skip town. But if you're an Oklahoma football fan, you might just want to say Chargers, Thunder, kind of working with the same kind of aspect, The Chargers have a lightning bolt as one of their main logos and stuff. Of course, LaDainian Tomlinson, LT, for maybe stands for lightning. The Chargers may think about changing their name a little bit to Lightning and coming to play in Oklahoma City within the next 10 years.
Taft Stadium?
Of course, Taft Stadium or wherever we get that new USL Stadium built in downtown area with the Maps 4 or 5, whatever project
near that
Maps
Ferris
is.
Wheel, by the
there
Ferris
we go,
Wheel, yeah.
By the Wheeler District. And that's my conspiracy theory for the week, is that the San Diego Chargers, who are now the LA Chargers, are going to make one more move because they're going to decide that paying to rent out their stadium to the Cronkies of the world and the LA Rams isn't exactly what they want for their image, and isn't exactly how they're going to make a ton of money. And instead, they may just try to get a whole new demographic. And instead of being the second team in LA that's definitely has less young talent assets moving forward, I think, as anyone else would see, and a much harder division in the AFC West than the Rams playing in the NFC West, I would think at least. I think the Chargers are going to have a change of heart and move one more time yet again whenever they realize, hey, you know what? LA wasn't all it's cracked up to be. As many people do in life when they realize, LA, a little expensive, a little busy, hard to get anywhere during rush hour especially. Maybe Oklahoma's the place to be. So that's my conspiracy theory of the week.
I like that.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to the latest Bedlam Brother podcast. Please like, review, and rate us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcast. And, of course, follow us at bedlambrother.com website, at Bedlam Brother on Twitter, and like the Facebook page, Bedlam Brother. All right. We'll catch you next week.